Today we're going to be learning about personal narratives. Now, what is a personal narrative? A personal narrative is a true story about your life. So, if you wrote a story about anything that has happened in your life, that would be a personal narrative. Let's take, for example, Sam. If Sam wanted to write about when he met his friend Jake, that would be a personal narrative. Or let's say maybe he wanted to write about a time that he moved and changed schools. That would also be a personal narrative. Or another example could be maybe Sam wants to write about a time he went camping. This also would be a personal narrative. So all three of these are great examples of personal narratives. Now, what's in a personal narrative? One of the things that's in a personal narrative is a story that has a beginning, middle, and end. And you've been writing stories for a long time. Now that you're a fourth grader, this should be something that is fairly easy for you. Another thing is setting. Setting's very important in a personal narrative. Your reader should know where they are. So you have to describe where you are. Something in fourth grade that we really focus on is details. You want to give a lot of details so that your reader can see where they are or they understand what's happening in the story. And you can do this by telling adjectives or using figurative language and many things, which we'll learn in the coming weeks. So let's look at details a little bit more. Now we're going to look at two different personal narratives. These two personal narratives will only focus on details. So they're not going to have a setting and they're not going to have a beginning, middle, or end. Now I want you to tell me which one do you think has the best details, and we'll talk about why later. All right, here's number one. I woke up and ate breakfast. Next, I rode the bus to school. There was a new kid at school. I sat with the new kid at lunch. After lunch, we had recess. And then science class. After school, I went home and did homework. All right, so that's number one. Let's look at number two. I sat with a new kid at lunch today. Her name was Becky, and she is also from Japan. We talked about our favorite movie, Avengers: Endgame. After school, Becky's mom said I could come to their house and watch more movies. So which one do you think is better? Like, which one's more interesting to you as you read it? There's one to me that is kind of boring, and there's one that is interesting because it has better details. And it's number two. Number two is a way better story when you're looking at which one has better details. All right, but why? What did number two do that number one didn't do? Well, it gave specific details. For example, the first one didn't say who the new kid's name was. This one does. It says it's Becky, right? It says also where Becky's from and why they got along well. It says something they both have in common. They both like the movie Endgame. And at the end, the new kid's even able to go see their friend at their house to watch more movies. So this has a lot of details in it, even though it's a very short story. And we can't call this a personal narrative because it doesn't have a beginning, a middle, an end, and it also doesn't have a setting. But I would say this does have good details, and that's something we really want to focus on, is good details. Okay, our topic for fourth grade for our first personal narrative is this. We want you to write about a time when you met a friend. So it could be any time. It could be a friend you met at this school. It could be a friend you met before that you don't get to see anymore. You can choose that one, but I would encourage you to write about a time that would be easy to write a story about. Like maybe it was something interesting happened, or somebody that is from a different culture that you've never learned about before, but because you made friends with them, you learned more about that culture. I'm excited to see what kind of ideas you guys will come up with as we're thinking of different personal narratives to write.